Hi, this is Michelle Kennedy, and this is Backspace. Thank you so much for joining us. This episode is about water, or as Joan Didion likes to call it, holy water. This particular essay by Joan Didion really stood out to me because after I thought about it, I've had a remarkable relationship with water. I was a swimmer as a small child. I was on the swim team. We went to the beach all the time when I was a kid. My mother loved the ocean. So I've spent a remarkable amount of time in water, on water, wanting to be near water. I love to paddle. I love to kayak. But then I've also had the experience of living without water. Water is a strange thing to think about, and yet there have been times in my life when the thought of water consumed almost all of my day. When we lived in Alaska, we used to haul all of our water to a dry cabin that we lived in on 40 acres in a little town called Ninilchik. We would drive from our cabin down a trail that was about a quarter to a third of a mile long. The end of the trail was a gravel road. We would drive out on that road and about 2 miles down what they call the Oil Well Road in Ninilchik, Alaska, where there was basically a PVC pipe sticking out of a slope in a hill above a small creek. And we would pull our truck over, sometimes with kids coming out of the truck and running all around on the side of the road. It was a very, very remote road. There were not a lot of people who came up and down this road. Do not be concerned. And then we would take our water jugs. Because I also had a team of sled dogs at this time, I used to have to haul a significant amount of water so that they could all drink and eat and do all the things. So we would bring 3 or 4 very large 20-gallon jugs. And then we would bring smaller 5-gallon jugs for our personal use in the house. So we would go and fill them up and put the lids on and then put them back into the truck. I have a great picture of what the PVC pipe looked like in the winter time. There was a community axe, which I just thought was hilarious and awesome. It felt very Vermont to me. I live in Vermont now. I grew up in Vermont. So it felt very familiar that there would be a community axe to bang the ice off the PVC pipe. And we did. And then you put your jugs under and you take them home. We had a solar shower that we could use near the wood stove. And we had a little gravity-fed tank, a small one that went above the sink, quote-unquote sink. It was a regular kitchen sink. It had no faucet because we didn't need one. We heated our water in pots on the stove. Sometimes if I was too lazy or there was a lot of snow, I would put pots of snow on the wood stove and we would just let them melt all day long, and then we would strain them and the dogs could drink, or we would use them for cooking, or we would boil it or whatever. But it was a very, very interesting way to live. And when water becomes so much a part of just your daily life, you have a much deeper appreciation for how difficult it is for people in other parts of the world to get water. We were very fortunate in that our water was very drinkable, even though we had to haul it. But there's a lot of work involved in hauling water. Water is heavy. 5-gallon jugs are heavy. I was at probably my most fit in my entire life when I lived in Alaska, because I just carried water everywhere, buckets full, jugs full. On rainy days, sometimes I would catch it so that we would have some for the garden later. So there was a lot of water hauling. Our life was a little better water-wise in Hawaii, but not much different. Hawaii is so funny because a lot of people have to haul their drinking water in Hawaii. There's not a lot of deep wells on the island of Hawaii. Lava is real, and people use catchment tanks. So there are these ginormous tanks behind their houses. Ours, I think, was 15,000 gallons, and we would gravity feed it, or I think we had a pump to get it into the house, but then it would gravity feed to the pump, and then the pump would bring it to our kitchen sink and our shower, and we had a toilet, which was something we did not have in Alaska. In Alaska, we had an outhouse. So we had upgraded, certainly, but we couldn't drink that water because you need a very expensive filter. It's a UV filter in order to sanitize that water enough to drink it. There's something called rat lungworm in Hawaii. It's a snail slug that is disgusting, but it also leaves a trail of a very dangerous disease. So rat lungworm is a horrible disease that you can get from this particular slug snail that can touch your water system. And if it does, you can get very, very ill. So not wanting to risk that, we only drank water from spigots that are at parks in Hawaii that just have free water. And you can fill up your jug and take it home. So much like Alaska, and that the water was just there and available, but also so much easier. And of course, no community acts in Hawaii to knock off the ice because you don't need one. So yeah, water has been a very, very big deal in my life. Of course, I now live in a lovely house that has running water and toilets and showers, and I don't always appreciate those luxuries, but they are luxuries to me in so many ways. So with that, I thought I would read today Joan Didion's version of what water means to her. This is Holy Water by Joan Didion. Some of us who live in arid parts of the world think about water with a reverence others might find excessive. The water I will draw tomorrow from my tap in Malibu is today crossing the Mojave Desert from the Colorado River, and I like to think about exactly where that water is. The water I will drink tonight in a restaurant in Hollywood is by now well down the Los Angeles Aqueduct from the Owens River, and I also think about exactly where that water is. I particularly like to imagine it as it cascades down the 45-degree stone steps that aerate Owens water after its airless passage through the mountain pipes and siphons. As it happens, my own reverence for water has always taken the form of this constant meditation upon where the water is of an obsessive interest, not in the politics of water, but in the waterworks themselves, in the movement of water through aqueducts and siphons and pumps and forebays and afterbays and weirs and drains, in plumbing on the grand scale. I know the data on water projects I will never see. I know the difficulty Kaiser had closing the first 2 sluiceway gates on the Guri Dam in Venezuela. I keep watch on evaporation behind the Aswan in Egypt. I can put myself to sleep imagining the water dropping 1,000 feet into the turbines at Churchill Falls in Labrador. If the Churchill Falls project fails to materialize, I fall back on waterworks closer at hand. The tail race at Hoover on the Colorado, the surge tank in the Tehachapi Mountains that receives California aqueduct water pumped before. And finally, I replay a morning when I was 17 years old and caught in a military surplus life raft in the construction of the Nimbus Afterbay Dam on the American River near Sacramento. I remember that at the moment it happened, I was trying to open a tin of anchovies with capers. I recall the raft spinning into the narrow chute through which the river had been temporarily diverted. I recall being deliriously happy. I suppose it was partly the memory of that delirium that led me to visit one summer morning in Sacramento, the Operations Control Center for the California State Water Project. Actually, so much water is moved around California by so many different agencies that maybe only the movers themselves know on any given day whose water is where. Actually, So much water is moved around California by so many different agencies that maybe only the movers themselves know on any given day whose water is where. But to get a general picture, it is necessary only to remember that Los Angeles moves some of it. San Francisco moves some of it. The Bureau of Reclamation's Central Valley Project moves some of it, and the California State Water Project moves most of the rest of it, moves a vast amount of it, moves more water farther than has ever been moved anywhere. They collect this water up in the granite keeps of the Sierra Nevada, and they store roughly 1 trillion gallons of it behind the Oroville Dam. And every morning, down at the project's headquarters in Sacramento, they decide how much of their water they want to move the next day. They make this morning decision according to supply and demand, which is simple in theory, but rather more complicated in practice. In theory, each of the project's 5 field divisions, the Oroville, the Delta, the San Luis, the San Joaquin, and the Southern divisions, places a call to headquarters before 9 a.m. and tells the dispatchers how much water is needed by its local water contractors, who have, in turn, based their morning estimates on orders from growers and other big users. A schedule is made. The gates open and close according to schedule. The water flows south and the deliveries are made. In practice, this requires prodigious coordination, precision, and the best efforts of several human minds, and that of a UNIVAC 418. In practice, it might be necessary to hold large flows of water for power production, or to flush out encroaching salinity in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, the most ecologically sensitive point on the system. In practice, a sudden rain might obviate the need for a delivery when that delivery is already on its way. In practice, what is being delivered here is an enormous volume of water, not quarts of milk or spools of thread, and it takes 2 days to move such a delivery down through Oroville into the Delta, which is the great pooling place for California water, and has been for some years alive with electronic sensors and telemetering equipment and men blocking channels and diverting flows and shoveling fish away from the pumps. It takes perhaps another 6 days to move this same water down the California aqueduct from the Delta to the Tehachapi and put it over the hill to Southern California. Pausing for water. While I'm drinking this water, I will say that I've been thinking about all of this water in Southern California. It's interesting because when we were traveling in the bus and then the RV, we went to go visit my oldest daughter who lives in Las Vegas. And I had never been down through the almond fields of Fresno and across the desert and out to Las Vegas. I had seen desert country before, Cache Creek, British Columbia, the other side of the big island where Kona is. It's a vast desert of lava rock, but I had never seen tumbleweed, Old West, Southwestern desert before. And it was remarkable, but I also couldn't understand where all the water came from. And it made me not want to eat almonds because I thought they were wasting so much water, and maybe they are. And we're not at the end of this essay yet, but it's interesting because water is the lifeblood of so much of all that we do. Learning about this aqueduct system through this essay from Joan Didion still blows my mind, even reading it again. I have had my water. I'm going to take one more sip just for good luck. And we will continue with Holy Water by Joan Didion. Putting some over the hill is what they say around the Project Operations Control Center when they want to indicate that they are pumping aqueduct water from the floor of the San Joaquin Valley up and over the Tehachapi Mountains. Pulling it down is what they say when they want to indicate that they are lowering a water level somewhere in the system. They can put some over the hill by remote control from this room in Sacramento with its UNIVAC and its big board and its flashing lights. They can pull down a pool in the San Joaquin by remote control from this room in Sacramento with its locked doors and its ringing alarms and its constant printouts of data from sensors out there in the water itself. From this room in Sacramento, the whole system takes on the aspect of a perfect $3 billion hydraulic toy, and in certain ways it is. Let's start draining quail at 12, was the 10:51 a.m. entry on the electronically recorded communications log the day I visited the Operations Control Center. Quail is a reservoir in Los Angeles County with a gross capacity of 1.6 billion gallons of water. Okay, was the response recorded in the log. I knew at that moment that I had missed the only vocation for which I had any instinctive affinity. I wanted to drain quail myself. Not many people I know carry their end of the conversation when I want to talk about water deliveries, even when I stress that these deliveries affect their lives indirectly every day. Indirectly is not enough for most people I know. This morning, however, several people I know were affected not indirectly, but directly by the way the water moves. They had been in New Mexico shooting a picture, one sequence of which required a river deep enough to sink a truck, the kind with a cab and a trailer and 50 or 60 wheels. It so happened that no water near the New Mexico location was running that deep this year. The production was therefore moved today to Needles, California, where the Colorado River normally runs, depending upon releases from Davis Dam, 18 to 25 feet deep. Now, follow this closely. Yesterday, we had a freak tropical storm in Southern California, 2 inches of rain in a normally dry month, and because this rain flooded the fields and provided more irrigation than any grower could possibly want for several days, no water was ordered from Davis Dam. No orders, no releases, supply, and demand. As a result, the Colorado was running only 7 feet deep past Needles today. Sam Peckinpah's desire for 18 feet of water in which to sink a truck not being the kind of demand anyone at Davis Dam is geared to meet. The production closed down for the weekend. Shooting will resume Tuesday, providing some grower orders water and the agencies controlling the Colorado release it. Meanwhile, many gaffers, best boys, cameramen, assistant directors, script supervisors, stunt drivers, and maybe even Sam Peckinpah are waiting out the weekend in Needles, where it is often 110 degrees at 5 p.m. and hard to get dinner after 8. This is a California parable, but a true one. I have always wanted a swimming pool and never had one. Me too, Joan. Me too. When it became generally known a year or so ago that California was suffering severe drought, many people in water-rich parts of the country seemed obscurely gratified and made frequent reference to Californians having to brick up their swimming pools. In fact, a swimming pool requires, once it has been filled, and the filter has begun its process of cleaning and recirculating the water, virtually no water. But the symbolic content of swimming pools has always been interesting. A pool is misapprehended as a trapping of affluence, real or pretended, and of a kind of hedonistic attention to the body. Actually, a pool is for many of us in the West a symbol not of affluence, but of order, of control over the uncontrollable. A pool is water made available and useful, and is, as such, infinitely soothing to the Western eye. It is easy to forget that the only natural force over which we have any control out here is water, and that only recently. In my memory, California summers were characterized by the coughing in the pipes that meant the well was dry, and California winters by all-night watches on rivers about to crest, by sandbagging, by dynamite on the levees, and flooding on the first floor. Even now, the place is not all that hospitable to extensive settlement. As I write, a fire has been burning out of control for 2 weeks in the ranges behind the Big Sur coast. Flash floods last night wiped out all the major roads into Imperial County. I noticed this morning a hairline crack in a living room tile from last week's earthquake, a 4.4 I never felt. In the part of California where I now live, aridity is the single most prominent feature of the climate, and I am not pleased to see, this year, cactus spreading wild to the sea. There will be days this winter when the humidity will drop to 10, 7, 4. Tumbleweed will blow against my house, and the sound of the rattlesnake will be duplicated 100 times a day by dried bougainvillea drifting in my driveway. The apparent ease of California life is an illusion, and those who believe the illusion real live here in only the most temporary way. I know as well as the next person that there is considerable transcendent value in a river running wild and undimmed, a river running free over granite, but I have also lived beneath such a river when it was running in flood, and gone without showers when it was running dry. The West begins, Bernard DeVoto wrote, where the average annual rainfall drops below 20 inches. This is maybe the best definition of the West I have ever read, and it goes a long way toward explaining my own passion for seeing the water under control. But many people I know persist in looking for psychoanalytical implications in the passion. As a matter of fact, I have explored in an amateur way the more obvious of these implications and come up with nothing interesting. A certain external reality remains and resists interpretation. The West begins where the average annual rainfall drops below 20 inches. Water is important to people who do not have it, and the same is true of control. Some 15 years ago, I tore a poem by Carl Shapiro from a magazine and pinned it on my kitchen wall. This fragment of paper is now the wall of a sixth kitchen and crumbles a little whenever I touch it, but I keep it there for the last stanza, which has for me the power of a prayer. It is raining in California, a straight rain, cleaning the heavy oranges on the bough, filling the gardens till the gardens flow, shining the olives, tiling the gleaming tile, waxing the dark camellia leaves more green. Flooding the day-long valleys like the Nile. I thought of those lines almost constantly on the morning in Sacramento when I went to visit the California State Water Project Operations Control Center. If I had wanted to drain quail at 10:51 that morning, I wanted, by early afternoon, to do a great deal more. I wanted to open and close the Clifton Court 4-bay intake gate. I wanted to produce some power down at the San Luis Dam. I wanted to pick a pool at random on the aqueduct into the Bureau of Reclamation's Cross Valley Canal, just to see how long it would take somebody over at Reclamation to call up and complain. I stayed as long as I could, and I watched the system work on the big board with the lighted checkpoints. The Delta salinity report was coming in on one of the teletypes behind me. The Delta tidal report was coming in on another. The earthquake board, which has been desensitized to sound its alarm, a beeping tone for Southern California, a high-pitched tone for the North, only for those earthquakes which register at least 3 on the Richter scale, was silent. I had no further business in this room, and yet I wanted to stay all day. I wanted to be the one that day who was shining the olives, filling the gardens, and flooding the day-long valleys like the Nile. I wanted still. That is the end of Holy Water by Joan Didion. Thank you for joining me for this particular essay. I hope you enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic. I love just the way she writes. I love how factual it is, but then it feels like a story. And truthfully, I learned a lot from this particular essay. And I love that she went into the operations control center and was like, I want to flip the switches. I want to play. I feel like that a lot. It reminded me a lot of a newspaper story I worked on many years ago. For several years, I was a daily newspaper reporter at the Green Bay News Chronicle in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Woo woo. And I wrote one of my big feature stories. I did a lot of investigative journalism on the I did read an article, and it might have been like many years ago in the New York Times or in Wired magazine, about how when you rinse your prescription drugs or when you rinse your medications or even just your face cream or whatever down the sink, the residual chemicals of those things remain in the water and sometimes in the drinking water. And so I was really interested in this, and being the environmentalist that I am, I approached the Green Bay Water Authority, and I can't remember, they're like the district authority or what they're called exactly, but you can look up the article. Actually, I'm sure it's somewhere on the internet. But I called them and I said, I would love to understand how this works. I have this concern. I'm sure other people would have this concern. We live right here on the Fox River. This stuff must go out into the river and damage the water. What kind of stuff do you guys have to do? It ended up that I got a whole tour and a whole class on how the water system in Green Bay, Wisconsin works. It was a stinky day, let me tell you, but it was fascinating. They were the kindest people on the planet, super concerned about how clean the water is. They have to drink it too. Their kids have to drink it too. So they were so open and so willing. And I ended up doing this big 2-part thing on the water system in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So this is certainly a very kind of personal, professional essay for me as well. I enjoyed reading it today out loud, and I hope you enjoyed hearing it. This is Backspace, Essays on Everything with me, Michelle Kennedy. Please feel free to visit my website, mishkennedy.com. I post some of my silly essays and my articles and my books. I've been a writer officially, probably professionally, since about 1997. So I'm kind of old. I used to submit articles by typewriter and dot matrix printer before they said stop sending things on a dot matrix printer. Oh boy. Anyway, here I am on the internet and podcasting now. So mishkennedy.com is where I keep all that stuff. You can find my books and my writings anywhere on the internet. Some of it's embarrassing, some of it isn't. Enjoy it either way. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you'll take another listen at another one of the episodes.